Meditation is a practice for the past and for the future. It's a way to shift your perspective. It's a way to promote healing in your mind and body. Even subconscious, we might be thinking something that is harmful, that is negative. The things that we say about our lives helps more of that come into our life.
Thoughts create our feelings, and then our feelings create our actions.
Yes.
So if we want to have different actions. Welcome to the Pretty Sister Podcast. I'm your host, Callie Stoyer, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. This is a place of belonging and sisterhood and friendship and fun. And I have a really great, wonderful guest here today, Jesika Harmon, who is a meditation expert in mindfulness, and she is fantastic. I've actually had the opportunity for the past few months, it's been, hasn't it, over the fall, where we've been doing weekly meditations, and it's been amazing, just transformative. And just like I always want to share the fun things that have come into my life, I would want to share them with you. And so I'm so grateful that you were willing to join the podcast and share some of her brilliance and expertise with all of you today. So you're in for a treat. Thank you, Jesika.
I'm so glad to be here.
Well, she's fabulous. Let's address this too. It's the beginning of the new year. How exciting. It's 2025.
I love the new year.
Yay. I love the new year too because it's new. It's fresh. We get to design it however we want. We can let go of the past. We can create new dreams, new ideas. So I guess that's a big question for you. And think about that as we're talking. What is it that you want to create in this new year? What kind of things are you dreaming up? What kind of goals are you setting? It's actually, we're already a few days into the new year, so you've probably been working on this already. Maybe you've already started something new and had a step back, and that's okay, because you're going to be able to use these tools of mindfulness to always ground you and come back to where you want to go and what you're trying to accomplish. So through the lens of this new year, that's what we're talking to you, to give you tools to help you. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. I've got a question for you to kick things off.
Great.
Because you taught this to me and I was like, oh, I love understanding the difference. And that is, explain to us what the difference between mindfulness and meditation is.
Yeah, it's a great question. And a lot of people use them interchangeably. Meditation is a practice for the past and for the future. So it's a way to shift your perspective. It's a way to promote healing in your mind and body. It's usually where you're going back and addressing things from the past or preparing for things of the future. It's a mental place that you go. Mindfulness are tools you use for the present. It's the art of being in the present moment. So things like breath work, things like mantras and affirmations, mindful eating, mindful listening. It's a state of being that really emphasizes and focuses on the present moment.
Okay. So one thing I've thought, and we'll often talk about, is that, our life is happening in the here and now. I'm a big proponent of happiness and, really trying to, I guess, squeeze every little bit out of life and enjoy it and be happy.
You're good at that. I've noticed.
Well, thank you. And we do that, I think, in large part by letting go of the past, not worry about the future, which is where I can go out of this anxiety that is plaguing people sometimes, is that too much worry about the future, but being really present in the here and now and seizing those, or just being grateful and appreciative of what's happening now and aware of it. So talk to us a little bit about that, of how we can use the mindfulness in that regard.
Sure. I think maybe if I can just give a little nod to your comment before of, letting the past go and not worrying about the future. So important. So true. But I think as a culture, we get caught in a place where we think, if I don't think about it, if I don't worry about it, it will just go away.
Right.
And we don't let ourselves process. We don't breathe. We don't heal. We don't take time for some of those things that have been really painful in the past. And that is where I have seen such strength and beauty in meditation. I was just with a client yesterday who had some really hard things, probably 20 years ago. And she's taken a lot of time to work through them. but not completely. And so sometimes meditation can be a beautiful way to visit something that happened, to let yourself process, maybe through writing, maybe just through thinking, maybe just through crying some more, just kind of getting it out, processing, and then you're in a place where you can better focus and be present and your best self in this moment.
Yes.
So I think there's a place for that, because then you're not constantly having this nagging thought or this nagging pain or something that you're just wanting to shove aside, if that makes sense.
Totally. Well, we have to honor our feelings and those emotions. And if we're just stuffing them down, I've heard it explained by my sister as taking a beach ball, and if you're in the pool, and if you're just trying to shove that beach ball,
everyone's probably tried that, to hold it down, and it's really hard.
Right. Yeah. Like, let me just sit on that ball, and you're moving all over the place, then it's really hard to keep that ball. And maybe you can for a little bit, but then eventually it will pop up and go exploding up into the air out of the water. And that's what, we do sometimes with our emotions, is we're trying to hold it down and repress it. But instead, I think the mindfulness that you're talking about, if we could just take it out and create a space for it, even just set it up, like acknowledge it, even like, okay, I'm going to deal with you. And maybe sometimes that's active through the meditation. And sometimes we just need to set it on the chair, and I know you're there.
Yeah.
And here's your spot. And I'm going to come back to it later, because we sometimes have to move on with life. I know you're a busy mom with lots of kids, and sometimes as mothers, I think it can be thought that we're just ignoring things, but it's not that we're ignoring it necessarily. I think it takes emotional strength to be able to set things aside and not allow our emotions to control us.
Yeah.
But rather to know how to, okay, I know you're there. I'm setting you here. I've got to do this, and then I'm going to come back to you. And that's why I like these tools, because if we know we're going to come back to it, we can then practice. That's why I call it, we're practicing mindfulness. We're practicing meditation, because it's not happening overnight or something that we just do once, like all good things for our health, like exercise and healthy eating. As you're thinking about these habits you want to establish, wouldn't it be great if we just had to do it once and then we're like, check, done? No, we have to establish healthy habits, and we have to be willing to put in the work. That's why I think now, having been doing the meditations with you all fall, when we started that, we were doing a group class. It's so fun. I can see the benefits having done it over a period of time, because it's that habit that you want to establish, addressing and taking time to work through our thoughts.
Yeah. And I think with what you were just pointing out, in being able to say, okay, I know I need to address this, and I will when the time is right, that's awareness. That's acceptance. That's saying, okay, I know that this is there, and then choosing when and how you're going to take time to work through it. Because you're right, it might not be the best time when your kids come home from school and you're making dinner, or when you're going to a big meeting, or, but if we don't take that time for ourselves, I love the thought that self-care is not selfish. It's something that is way more effective if you're doing it regularly than just when it's an emergency and there's some big crisis. You've got to have that well to draw from.
Right. And everybody is better for it if we take care of ourselves. That's, the saying of, if mom ain't happy, nobody eats happy, or something like that in the home. And it's true, because we're powerful with the effect that we have over our homes and family. And so if you realize that you need to take care of yourself and take the time to do so, and don't feel selfish about it. It's you being a good parent, a good spouse, a good friend, the more you take care of yourself. And I can say that positively, having now just about finished raising my kids. I'm almost done. And so now I have older adult children who I think are grateful for seeing the patterns, that the ways that I showed up doing self-care. I'm seeing them now doing some similar things and not resenting it, but doing it themselves and understanding this is how we stay healthy. This is how we stay happy. Is we take care of ourselves. And I love that.
Yeah. It's making me think of one of probably the most impactful tools of mindfulness that I've experienced over these last 5 years, and that is self-compassion. Because I think as women, as moms, there's so many things on our to-do list, so many things that we're trying to do, because we can do a lot of great things. There's people we want to help, ways we want to grow, But when we don't quite achieve or do all the things on our list, we beat ourselves up. New Year's is the perfect time, I think, to recognize that sometimes setting these big, huge goals don't really serve us. Maybe setting something super small this year, maybe even just for the first quarter or just for the first half of the year, just one teeny tiny thing. Because then when you achieve that, you feel so good rather than these huge, huge goals that then you beat yourself up. And I found it so interesting. There's actually some great studies behind self-compassion where they show that people who show themselves compassion talk to themselves like they would talk to a good friend or a sister or a child. It triggers a growth mindset.
Oh, wow.
So rather than, that self-esteem or like, oh, I'm so great, or looking at my strengths or whatever, just being gentle, talking to myself when I mess up, saying, I had a situation just a couple weeks ago where my oldest is a senior and she and I are very different. And there's certain things that she's working on and she's trying really hard, but it's hard for me to see those things and not see the things that she could be doing better.
Right.
And we had a conversation, one of kind of the heated conversations where I'm trying to help her see some of the things she needs to kind of pick up the slack on, and said a few things that I wish I wouldn't have. And that night I was sitting before bed just thinking through, I wish I wouldn't have said that, wish I wouldn't have said that. But because I have spent time practicing self-compassion, I said, no, stop. What did I do well in that conversation?
I like that.
And I remembered that I had wanted to say something about her cell phone use, which is usually part of the problem of wasting time or whatever for any teenager. But I didn't. I wanted to say something and I caught myself. I was like, that is not going to help in this conversation. Don't say anything.
Yeah.
And so I was able to just like, okay, good job. Focus on that good part of the conversation. And I think we need more of that self-compassion if we want to progress, if we want to achieve our goals.
Yes, absolutely. I love that, recognizing that. And also remembering that in those conversations that we've had, when you take the time to reflect, yes, you can figure out what I did right. And also, I think we do well to remember if we did make a mistake, if we did say something that we want to change or reframe or revisit, we can do that. And I think it really teaches our children when we do. Like the times where I've gone to my kids and said, hey, I'm sorry that I said that, or this is what I really meant, which takes some humility and it takes that time of reflection. They really respond to that because they're learning, oh, you don't have to be perfect either. Like mom's not perfect. I make mistakes. Sometimes my emotions get the best of me, but I'm sorry. This is what I meant. We can revisit it. And oftentimes when that happens too, the emotions are cooled down or it's not heat of the moment. Or we've had a chance to think about it and come back as our better selves. So that's been really powerful for me. And I've loved. It's not always easy to do, but afterwards, I like the times when I had those experiences with my kids where I've been able to apologize. Yeah, I've been able to ask for forgiveness and say, will you forgive me? I want to do better at this. And then they're really forgiving, and then they're learning how that works. So I love that. The other thing you said that I loved was, and I think you also taught this in a meditation recently that we did, but just this idea that how would your friend treat you? Like as we're doing that self-compassion, how would you say it to your friend? How would you say it to your kids? And when you really think about that and you start to cheer yourself on the same way you would with your friends, with your children, it completely changes the way you're looking at yourself. Yeah. And that's a helpful practice to remember.
And it's not even just helpful, but it's physiologically better for our bodies. Every time, I love when talking about thoughts and the power of words to teach people that every time you think a thought, any kind of thought, positive, negative, helpful, harmful, it sends an electromagnetic current through your body. So there's an actual physiological response every time we think something. So if you make a mistake, if you say something you wish you wouldn't have, and you start saying, oh, I'm so dumb. Oh, I always do that. Why do I always mess up? Like those things that are then affecting your physical body in ways that can be harmful. Versus if we know how, learn how, practice changing our internal narrative, then we are filling ourselves with light and with love and with good energy that will only help us in whatever we're working on.
That is so amazing. I really think it's amazing. I hope you're listening and paying attention to that. That just this idea that it physically changes our bodies. And you did a meditation once where you said words. I've mentioned that before on the podcast. I often get good ideas from our meditations.
Good.
I know, you're so amazing. But where you, I don't know if you remember this, you said positive words, negative words.
Yeah.
And asked us to talk about the way we felt.
Yeah.
And you physically felt a difference.
Yeah. It's something I love to do with groups. And I've done it with a lot of high school groups. And I'm amazed every time at the responses just by saying, and you could even try it here. If you close your eyes and I said the word darkness or sad, and you just become aware of the thoughts or feelings that come into your mind, I didn't say anything else besides that one word. There's probably thoughts, images, memories. But then if I say a word like love or yes or light or whatever, similarly, there's different thoughts, different feelings that come. And so I think we forget sometimes that even subconscious, we might be thinking something that is harmful, that is negative. If we walk around saying, oh, I'm so tired, I'm so tired, I'm so stressed. I mean, every time we see a friend, it's become not a pet peeve, but I've just really become aware of anytime you run into someone, oh, how are you doing? Oh, it's just so crazy. I'm just so busy. And the things that we say about our lives that really just helps more of that come into our life.
Right. Well, and first of all, I got the chills when you said that. I mean, like I felt when you said sad, those negative words, I felt a shift. I wonder if you did too. So it absolutely is true. But where our focus grows. And so our self-talk,
Amen.
What we're seeing matters. If we, just like you said, if we're coming out and saying, oh, I'm just so tired, or I just have no time to do things, those things that are coming out of our mouths, pay attention to them, because if it's negative, those are the thoughts that are stuck in our head, and that is what we are creating to show up in our life.
Yeah.
So if you want, I think this is such a powerful thing to remember. If you're, setting out your year and you want to create more success, more happiness, more joy, whatever it is that you've thought of, that you're thinking about, the first thing you need to do is you got to look at what your thoughts are about that, and what you're saying. Yeah. And that's why I think I just love meditation and mindfulness, whichever you're practicing, both all the time are wonderful and necessary, but it's helping us to get right back to our thoughts.
Yeah.
One thing that I often teach and talk about is our thoughts create our feelings, and then our feelings create our actions.
Yes.
So if we want to have different actions in our life, a different results, we got to come back to looking at, well, how do we feel about that? And whatever we're feeling, well, what was I thinking? Because that thought's creating that feeling. And so with meditation, that's our chance to change our thinking at a really subconscious level. Because that's the trick, right? Is getting into that wiring, that autonomic, pathways.
Exactly.
And I know you know a lot about that in neuroplasticity, and I mean, she's an expert, guys. She teaches this stuff.
No, I've had it change my life and love it so much.
Let's talk about that just a little bit. We don't need to go super deep. This isn't a science. You go to Huberman Labs for that stuff. But talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I love what you said about even just thinking about the thoughts, the feelings, the actions, because it can happen subconsciously. You have a feeling, oh, I'm so tired. You have a thought that leads to a thought, oh, my child was up again in the night. They're always up in the night, which then leads to an action. Oh, I'm getting frustrated. I'm mad at my child. Oh, I'm going to have a bad day. It can happen. That spiral can take you down a negative path without even thinking about it.
Before you know it, it's just like a thief in the night.
Totally.
Just derailing all your success.
But when you choose a different thought, that spiral can take you upward, which is so beautiful. So I could have that same feeling, oh, I'm so tired. But if I choose even if the first thought comes, oh, my child was up again in the night. Oh, my child, I just told that they could sleep. But then if I just say no, and gratitude works so perfect here to say like, okay, what am I grateful for? I'm grateful they were only up twice instead of 4 times the night before. Wow, they're getting better at their sleeping. Oh, you feel then hopeful. You see how it just like then that action, that thought, that feeling, it just spirals you up, which is so beautiful. And it just takes a little bit of practice. Just like you said, it's those neurons that are firing. And if they're always firing negative thoughts, then that's what's going to connect. But if I can practice the positive, and like I said, gratitude is a great one to practice here, because if you think of it as, it might not come in the moment, but if at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, I'm taking some time to think about some things that I'm grateful for, it's going to start happening in those moments. It's going to become a little bit more automatic, which is so beautiful. It's something you can develop and your brain will go there.
Yeah. Well, I've always said gratitude is just a shortcut back to happiness. It's such a great
That's a great way to say it.
It really is, because at any point in time, you can take a pause. I mean, it's something where I have a practice of praying in the morning, praying at night before going to bed, and starting both of those prayers off with gratitude. You know, I mean, it's a great way to bring those to our forefront and starting my day. But gratitude is something you can think of at the stoplight. You know, you can think of while we're cooking. I mean, at any time you catch yourself feeling sad or feeling not enough or feeling things aren't working out, that you could always return to gratitude, and it can just get you. It's like a little bit of a reset button.
I love to think of it as like railroad tracks, you know, when the train's going right here and then you have that lever that you could pull that takes you this way or takes you that way. I feel like gratitude is the one that you're going down this path. It's going to be a bad day or whatever, to be like, no, I'm going to shift.
Yes.
I'm going to go this way instead. Thinking about something I'm grateful to. I feel like it gets a bad rap, almost just like, oh yeah, sure, try a gratitude journal, or oh yeah, just come up with what I'm grateful for. But it is a power. It is amazing.
Well, that's often how it goes. Like the simplest of things we avoid and we don't do, but they are the most powerful things that can have such a huge effect on our life. So don't ignore it. Don't ignore these simple things. And in fact, keeping it simple, the KISS method is always so effective.
Yeah.
We don't have to overcomplicate things
And
really make it easy.
Don't take our word for it. Experiment on it. Just try it. Try it yourself. And even a little tiny bit of gratitude can go a really long way.
Okay, so in addition to what we've talked about, there's many other health benefits. Let's just list some of them out that you can get.
For sure. From meditation and
mindfulness.
Yes.
I know you can get better sleep.
Reduce your stress, better circulation, better health, better mental health, obviously, less anxiety, less depression. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to just Google. The list is so long. Benefits of mindfulness and meditation. And like I said, even just trying a little bit allows you to experience that firsthand almost immediately.
So I know you work with a lot of clients, teach a lot of classes in schools, online. We're going to have to put some links for you to be able to find her. But share with us, like, maybe just a story or two or something that comes to mind of how you, like, the types of issues you're helping people resolve. Because I know you're doing that with people and their mental health, and it is such a problem right now. Mental health issues plaguing people. I know your family's really involved, your husband's work in that as well. What are some of the things you're finding?
Yeah, sure. I think probably the majority of the examples I share from my own personal life, because that's where I've experienced the most. I actually have one child who she has just become, and I'll probably get emotional, she has just been such a gift because she has allowed me to use and practice these tools of mindfulness. Maybe a brief story.
Yes.
I went in, she's older now, but she was in second grade. I went into parent-teacher conference sitting across from the teacher, and the teacher looks at me and she says, "Oh, she is just the golden child of the classroom. She is always on task. She's so obedient. She's so kind." She just starts listing things off. And
dream.
And I literally just sat there like this, and I said 3 times in that conversation, Oh, I'm so glad she's like that for you. Oh, I'm so glad she's like that for you. She's my hardest child at home. She's my hardest child at home. And I just sat there, wow, that's great. I walked out of that classroom, Callie, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. You are choosing to see her that way. Wow. And I just lost it, just sitting there in the hallway at the school, just crying like, I am making my life harder by choosing to see those things in my child. And so I went home, and because I've practiced a lot of these tools of mindfulness, here's a couple you could try. I decided that, and she had called her, she's the golden child of the classroom. And this is my daughter that has golden hair. It's like this beautiful brown gold color, and her eyes are like a light brown gold. And I was like, she's my golden girl.
Yes.
And so I wrote in my little notebook that I have by my bed how she has been my golden girl today. And I just set an intention of every night, I'm going to write at least one thing, one way that she's been my golden girl that day. I'm going to look for that. And then I decided I'm going to call her my golden girl. And in my morning meditation, super simple, super brief, I would just visualize her face in front of me, and I would just say, my golden girl. You're my golden girl. And I started calling her that. Oh, hey, golden girl. And the first couple times she's like, Mom, why are you calling me a golden girl? Like, she was second grade. She was oldest, she wasn't like she was a toddler. And I was just like, because look at your hair, look at your eyes, you're my golden girl. And after just a couple weeks of this practice, writing that down every night, it was amazing the things I was noticing in her. She was so helpful around the kitchen. She was helping her little brother. I just started seeing that. And what I love, and here's the science behind it, we have something in the back of our brain called our reticular activating system. And that is at the brainstem, the little filter that allows our brains to see and know what is important and worth noting and what isn't. For example, if I'm thinking of buying a new home, trying to sell my home, I probably can tell you which homes are for sale in the neighborhood.
Yes, so you're now looking.
I'm looking for it, right? Yes. Versus someone who isn't, and you ask them, I don't know, are there any homes for sale in your neighborhood? They're probably not going to have a clue, right?
Like, I don't know.
Because our brains are so amazing. They can say as we're driving, oh, you don't need to notice that. That's not really important to you right now. Or, home for sale. So just by noticing and looking for that in my daughter, I completely changed my paradigm shift, our relationship, and it has been so beautiful and helpful.
I love this story. It caused me to think of a few things, but one, the story of pretty sisters. My sisters calling me pretty. Now I'm sure.
When you told me the story, I thought of that immediately. Like, you thought you were so pretty. You are beautiful. But, from your sisters to say, I'm so pretty. They call me pretty. Yeah, it's so powerful.
It was so powerful growing up that way. And I was wondering, gosh, was I really bad? And they had to come up with that. I don't know that we were smart enough at that. Then to like, we got to switch her behavior. Let's call her pretty. But no, them calling me that was such a gift to me. And, it wasn't about looks. It was just that it was their love for me. Just like you're calling her golden child. Yes, she had some golden attributes, but it was the way you were loving her and just the feeling that you had towards her that you're putting into words. And that's what my sisters did for me. And then I in turn did it for them. And then we brought in our girlfriends and we called them pretty. And it just grew to where now I'm calling you, listeners, my pretty sisters, because I feel this way about you and I want you to feel this way about yourself and see yourself that way. So powerful how we can shift a whole situation with the way we're looking at it. And it's so true, because we often will want other people to change. Like, we'll see the behavior, something that somebody's doing wrong, that's offending us, it's bothering us, and we think they need to fix it. But maybe they do.
Yes.
Maybe there's some bad behavior, and maybe there's some boundaries you have to draw. And of course, I would never be saying you need to put yourself in harm's way or in situations where, you're subjugating yourself to something bad. But oftentimes it's us that, we only have control over ourselves.
We have no control over that.
And the more we can just let them do what they're going to do and not wait. I guess that's the question, is how long do you want to wait for them to fix their behavior?
Yeah, you'll probably be waiting forever.
Yes, and it can steal you or steal from you your time and your happiness, and you're giving power to situations that you don't have to. Where we can take back the power and we can say, okay, and I applaud you for walking out of there realizing, wait a minute, this is me, I can shift something.
Yeah.
And then in turn, it's like a dance. You change the move, she changes the move. And then that is how we often can initiate change, is by first changing ourselves. And that's so powerful.
Honestly, it is the only way to change your life. Any relationship, anything, is to change yourself first. Another quick story that comes to mind, a woman who was taking a women's mindfulness workshop that we teach, she noticed that every time one of her adult daughters would call, this is a daughter who has had a lot of challenges, a lot of hard things, been through a lot. Every time this daughter calls, she would get this really nervous, anxious response, like, okay, what is it this time? Because there's been a lot of calls where it's been bad news.
Right.
So as we talked through it, we realized that it wasn't all the time that there was a hard thing or whatever, but there had just been enough. So what if she changed the name on her daughter's, ID, whatever, to My Miracle Girl? Because as she thought about it, yes, there had been so many hard things, but there had been so many beautiful miracles. And simply by changing that My Miracle Girl, when she saw that she was calling, she now thought of the miracles, not of the challenges.
And then it's going to affect the way she answers that phone
completely.
Call. She's going to answer with excitement of, how are you? What's going on?
Yes.
Instead of, oh, how are you?
And how she shows up.
And mom is going to drop in my lap.
Totally. But then allowing her to show up as the mom she wanted to show up as in that phone call, regardless of what it was.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
It's so amazing. Well, another thing that came to mind too when you were talking about that is that, and this ties to the gratitude practice as well, but we can, because we're looking at life and every situation through our own lens, it's our own perspective, it's like our own pair of sunglasses that we have on, we can change that outcome by shifting the way we're thinking about it. And that's what the gratitude's for. It's like, shift the way you're thinking about it. But also when we do take the time to practice that shifting of our perspective, we can always, there's always kind of, it's like a game you can play that there's going to be something that's, or somebody or a situation that's worse. Like where you said it when you were talking about a child sleeping through the night, like, okay, well, at least they only woke up twice.
Yeah.
Because it was worse before and it's getting better.
Yes.
And I've even done some books I love to read. And some of them are heavy, like if you're reading history, like about the Holocaust or different hard things. But I don't do it often because it can be depressing. But I'll sometimes, if I'm having a hard time in life, I'll read one of those hard books because it's like, wow, it just, you read what other people have experienced, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, what I'm dealing with is nothing, like absolutely nothing compared to what somebody else had to go through.
That's actually one of the ways to practice gratitude.
Yeah, it gives me just this immense amount of appreciation and this bolstering of like, okay, well, they did that hard thing, now I can too. And it's like, it's the one time I think comparative thinking helps, because I often comparison can be the thief of joy, that common phrase. Yeah. But if we do ever get tempted to compare, I think it should be for the sake of inspiration. We're looking at what other people are doing and saying, okay, they did that, I can do this. Or they did that and look how did they do that? And then with this lens of, all right, I'm learning from that, I'm inspired by that, now I can do that too.
Yeah. And I love in what you're saying too, because one of the other key, I think maybe the very first principle of mindfulness is awareness. When we are able to detach from our thoughts, like you explained in reading something, a situation that's worse than ours or more challenging or hard, we're able to shift our perspective in a way that allows us to shed a little more light on what's really happening. I think sometimes when we get bogged down in our stresses, our challenges, our trials that are very real, and we've got to have that self-compassion and that awareness to know that, but to also be able to question sometimes the thoughts that come around the things we're going through. is that really true? Is that, yes, I'm feeling this way, but does it really mean that? That's actually a really beautiful practice that you can have cognitive fusion, which is so helpful when you're reading a good book and you're following the storyline. It allows you to connect with what's happening, or you can practice cognitive diffusion, which allows you to pull away a little bit. I use the example all the time with teenagers where you pass someone in the hall and they kind of give you a dirty look. Immediately, what thoughts come? Oh, she hates me. She's mad at me. Oh, what did I do? I think every teenager can relate.
They're having their own thought that's completely unrelated to you, right?
Exactly. But if you fuse to those thoughts, if you believe those thoughts that come, she must hate me. She must be mad at me. What did I do? Then that affects you versus, I wonder if she's having a bad day. Even if those initial thoughts come first, oh, maybe she's mad at me. What did I do? Wait, or is something going on in her life? That can happen as adults over text. You get kind of a dry text from someone and you immediately, what did I do? What's going on or whatever. So questioning our thoughts, pulling back a little bit, just like if you have a vacant lot, what usually grows there? Weeds. Who plants those weeds? No one. Sometimes thoughts just come, and that doesn't mean they're true. So a beautiful practice of mindfulness is being able to step back a little bit, question our thoughts, and then choose the ones that we want.
I call that the fact or fiction game. Like I'll do that in my mind, or even with my kids when they're saying something insightful. Is that fact or fiction?
I love that.
Let's think about that. And I'll talk them through it because oftentimes when you have these thoughts and they feel real, especially teenagers, it feels really real to them. But then when you pull it back and say, well, is that fact or fiction? Let's look at that. And we get to the real facts. And the facts are usually not, but they're conjured up in their mind. Yeah. Or in my mind. And when you start to do that and then I love mixing that with compassion, like you said, like just really trying to give compassion and the benefit of the doubt to people.
Yeah.
Is so much better than the alternative of thinking, well, they don't like me or they were mad at me or whatever, because we wouldn't be wise to just assume that most people are having a really bad day. And most people are. They're experiencing something that they're not putting out to the world because that's not what we do, or it maybe isn't appropriate, but a lot of people are having hard challenges going on. And so it's not always just about us. And if we have compassion on people, then we can make it less about us. Yeah. And it's a lot more joyful when we do that.
And just to point out the benefits, when you said benefits of mindfulness and meditation, the benefits of practicing just those tools of mindfulness, the, fact or fiction, kind of stepping back from your thoughts, that compassion to others, just look at how that benefits your health. Instead of stressing in those moments, instead of getting all worked up, instead of getting anxious, or instead of having a relationship that then is a little bit strained because you're wondering what they're thinking and what, maybe all that goes on, you're in a place of peace.
Yes.
You're in a place of calm.
Such a valuable word.
It is, but just those two simple things we talked about can affect us more than we know.
I love that. So it's, we're in January. In the coming weeks, we're going to be talking more about goal setting and getting your year's stuff right, because that's what I want for all of you, is to have a fantastic, fabulous year in every way. So one exercise that we're going to talk more about in the next podcast. So I'm just going to tee it up, and then I want your perspective on just I'll let you end on kind of helping me tee it up for next week. But we're going to talk about, this is a great exercise that I love doing, but looking at your past year, or actually your past 10 years. Because sometimes we talked last week about just looking at your past year and finding 3 things from your year that you're proud of. But in this next episode, we're going to talk about, take a look at the past 10 years, because sometimes you need a wider angle view to see, because maybe you had a bad year. We sometimes have off years. But I think if you go back 10 years, you can find 10 good things that you did that you're proud of, that you've accomplished. And then also look forward 10 years, because again, sometimes we need a nice big, oftentimes at the new year, we're looking at the year, and I love that. But I want you to look 10 years out, and what are your 10-year goals? because I think you sometimes have to have those bigger perspectives and then kind of come back closer. And you did actually start off, another thing I loved, and we'll hit this concept this month too, is the book, The 12-Week Year. I don't know if you've read that.
I have heard of it.
Okay, it's a great book that I often love to read at the top of the year, because it's taking a year and putting it, instead of like, okay, this is what I want to accomplish in the full year, but just in 12 weeks, like just the baby steps. So it's like, I want to look at this at all angles. But having said that, and knowing that that's where we're going in the next podcast, what are your thoughts about that? Like having the big view back, the big view forward. What can you say, especially as I'm asking people to think about that? I know you can use meditation to call those things up, both the past things you're proud of and also the future dreams that you have. That's a great thing to meditate over, right?
For sure. And what I love about it is, and the 12-week year concept, done a lot of work, like you mentioned, with my husband's company, Impellis, teaching classes, and they're very focused on mental and physical health. And a quote that they live by, that they put on everything, is little by little, a little becomes a lot. It's a Tanzanian proverb. My dad says it all the time. And I think that too often we look, I mean, maybe we had a bad year. Maybe we had about 5 years. Maybe there's been a challenge that's been in our life for several years. And so looking at that 10-year view, I think could be so powerful, because then you see how far you've come. It's like, there's a meditation that I do often that I love. It's like standing on the top of a mountain and you look back at the trail of how far you've come. And then you look forward at the other mountain ranges ahead of you. And how often when we're on a trail, if you like to hike, maybe you can visualize this, when we're on a trail and there's like a stone in the way or a river we have to cross, do we throw a big fit and, oh, this is so hard, I have to climb over this rock, or I have to cross through this river and it's this big, huge thing? No, it's just part of the hike.
Right.
We just do it.
You get a little wet. It's okay.
Yes. And if we were to think of our lives as, okay, in 10 years, I want to be at the top of that mountain. And I know there's going to be some challenges along the way. We're going to have to step over. But if we could see them as stepping stones and focus our goals this year more on what is going to allow me to show up in the way I want to show up, or to work through these challenges the way I want to work through, and find the smallest possible thing to start working on. Because if I can start changing my brain, my thoughts, then I'm going to be different as I encounter those different challenges. So even if it's one word, I find for me, if I have an affirmation, like an I am statement or a mantra, something that I'm working on, or even like with my daughter, she's my golden girl, or writing it, 6 weeks is a really good amount of time to feel like I've made that neural connection. That then even if when I'm in a moment where my old thought comes, if I've practiced the new thought for about 6 weeks, it follows really closely after.
And then you can move on to adopting a new one. And just
totally.
Line upon line.
Yes.
Baby step upon baby step. You're changing who you are and how you respond to things. And I see things.
And all of any goal setting stuff you'll read, there's so many great podcasts, books, people who talk about goal setting. So this probably isn't the first time you've heard this, but make it as small as possible. And I think mindfulness and meditation has been just the best teacher on that for me, to just see this teeny tiny thing that I work on, one word or one phrase that I focus on for a couple of months, but it completely changes a relationship, completely changes how I approach something, and completely changes your life. It's amazing.
Well, that reminds me of the book Atomic Habits.
Yes.
Where it's like the
so good
of little things that we work on at a time.
Exactly that concept.
Small atomic habit can create such big change.
Yep.
So amazing. Aren't you so glad, Pretty Sisters, that I brought her on the podcast? I feel like we could just talk forever, and I'm sure we're going to want you back on, because
I would love it.
Amazing, just the way you describe things and story tells. She's just wonderful, and I am so glad that I'm able to share her with all of you, and hopefully some of the things that she said, I know some of the things that she said and that we talked about will help you this year. So please, take a listen, or maybe even re-listen to this one, because there's so many nuggets in here. And again, I just want to thank you for joining with us today, being part of this sisterhood. Again, a place where we want you to feel loved and feel special, and a safe place for you to know how pretty and wonderful you are. So thank you again for being here. Thank you, Jesika.
Yeah, thank you for such beautiful, great work you're doing.
Well, we try, right? to be an influencer, to help people in any way. I often think if one person's listening to this and learning something, then it's worth it. It's worth it for just one, and hopefully there's many of you out there. So again, thank you for being here. Stay pretty, and I'll be with you again next week.